Well, hello and welcome to the Beyond the Youth Room podcast. My name is Ryne and this is Keith. And today, Keith and I are going to be taking the Timothy test live during this podcast. And so we would love for you to stay tuned and take it for yourself.
How can we have revival like in our town? It's like, okay, I want you to go home. I want you to draw a circle on the floor. I want you to stand in that circle and pray for revival within that circle.
I'm going to say this like, and my voice is going to get high, as in I think.
If you expect ministry just to be peaceful all the time and like not have any issues, then yeah, you're going to be frustrated a lot.
And if ministry is peaceful and you don't have any problems, you're not doing ministry.
Yeah.
On the way home the other night after youth group, I was like, I know it's my job. I was like, but it feels like every youth group is something. Like
it wasn't even in their minds of like, oh, well, he'll either do this or this. It's like option number 3 that you weren't even aware of. It's going to rain down bread from the sky.
I just read that. What stresses are you facing? Are you overwhelmed by busyness, trying to figure out how to balance all the demands on your time? Are you freaking out because kids aren't showing up or meeting your expectations? Are you frustrated? Divorce is up, anxiety is up, depression is up. Far too many youth leaders have given up. Have you doubled down on your commitment to Christ in his cause of reaching, encouraging, discipling, and unleashing the next generation? And so what's interesting here...
For people that may not know, because I don't even fully know, because you signed me up for this and I have no idea what I'm going to do here. But what is the Timothy test?
Yes. So
where did you get that from?
So we are both disciples of Greg Steer, I think would be fair to say.
Yeah.
So anything Greg reads or writes, we've even had Greg on this podcast.
Yeah.
So if you've not checked out the podcast episode with Greg Steer, why youth ministry is broken and how we can fix it, go back on our YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Go ahead, check that one out, because that was really, really cool to see.
And who is Greg Steer? I mean, So if you don't know who that is, he's the founder of Dare to Share Ministries.
Yep.
And is a leading voice in teenage evangelism, which is something we're very passionate about as well.
So as Keith and I are always looking for podcast content, we're always looking for, hey, what do we feel like would be beneficial to our listening audience? If you ever have any ideas, like, please send them to us. Like, that is not a burden for us at all. Like, that is definitely helpful for us. But as I was kind of looking through some blogs and like, hey, what are some helpful things that maybe we could do? I came across a blog post from Greg. This was this past year. And the title of this blog post is, Can You Pass the Timothy Test? And so the idea of this comes from 2 Timothy 4:5, where Paul writes to Timothy and he says, but you keep your head in all situations, endure hardship, do the work of an evangelist, discharge all the duties of your ministry. And so he says, toward the end of the Apostle Paul's final letter, he gave his protege Timothy 4 challenges. I've come to nickname these challenges the Timothy test, and they're essential to effective ministry, especially youth ministry. And so he says, as you answer each of these questions, normally rhetorically, Keith and I, out loud, he says, give yourself a grade from 1 to 5, 1 being a hard no and 5 being an enthusiastic yes. So Keith and I are going to be a little bit vulnerable here. This is kind of like us
just you are. I'm not ready.
To kind of look through, but again, we encourage you to think through on your own. If you normally listen to this podcast while you're multitasking, we love that. This might be one where you might want to sit down in kind of a reflective moment and kind of think through this, or hear this, listen to what Keith and I have to say, and then maybe sit down, at a later date and do this for yourself. But you ready?
Let's do this.
It's not going to be too bad. All right. The first one.
Are you going to read it?
Yes. Are you calmly facing the stresses of your ministry? So this is from that passage where he says, keep your head in all situations. And I'll read what Greg wrote, because I think it's helpful. He says, these words were written by someone who was about to literally lose his head to Nero's executioner. But Paul was calm. He knew the sharp blade that awaited him would launch him into the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ. Wow, that's powerful. He says, imagine being Timothy. Imagine the baton of the Apostle Paul falling to you. Imagine the stress of trying to manage the legacy of the greatest apostle. Imagine the stress of following up on the many churches Paul had planted and fighting for the truth against the many heretics that had infiltrated the church. I'm sure all of these thoughts and more surged through Timothy's mind as Paul awaited execution, but Paul reminds Timothy to, quote, keep calm and minister. What stresses are you facing? Are you overwhelmed by busyness, trying to figure out how to balance all the demands on your time? Are you freaking out because kids aren't showing up or meeting your expectations? Are you keeping your head in all situations? So, Keith, are you calmly facing the stresses of your ministry? 1 being a hard no, 5 being an enthusiastic yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with a 4.
Okay.
And I'll explain why.
You're allowed to have good answers. Like, you're allowed to feel like you're doing.
I can't have bad answer. Yeah,
no, I'm just saying you're allowed to feel like you're doing well.
So no, I feel like this is I say this now and probably watch, like, by the end of the day I'm gonna feel like a 1, but. I think this does depend on the type of year, or like because we have different stresses. So like we just finished our winter camp season as we're filming this. And there were stresses leading up to that. I feel like we're in a good season of our youth ministry, like where parents are trusting what we're doing, like students are on board with what we're doing. Like there's always things we can get better at. I don't feel like there's tons of stresses in our ministry currently, and we have great leaders. Like there's no leaders, and I'm like, like, and there has been seasons where I'm like, what is he gonna say tonight, or what are they, like, are they gonna show up today, or like, I mean, and really, like I feel like we're in a good season of ministry, and there's not a lot of stresses right now.
Yeah,
I really hesitate to say that though. But yeah, the only thing I would say, just always trusting. So there's kind of twofold for me. So so one is like the local church aspect. I'm a youth pastor at a church, and then there's other part where I'm the executive director for Cutting Edge Ministries. And who sponsors this podcast? Like this is why we do the content that we're doing here. And so with that, we have different challenges, different stresses on either one of those ministries that can cause me stress. But I kind of have like a trusting mentality towards the Lord. Like just even reading in our Bible reading plan through Numbers, where you go into the wilderness. Israel goes in the wilderness. And they're like, how are we going to survive? There's no food, there's no water. And then the Lord literally creates an option that wasn't even available then. Like it wasn't even in their minds of like, oh, well, he'll either do this or this. It's like option number 3 that you weren't even aware of. He's going to rain down bread from the sky.
I just read that yesterday. That's funny.
And so what that kind of passage reminded me of, no matter what season you're in, like to trust the provider rather than the provision, or like the who rather than the how. And so within that, I mean, like I'm always, or most of the time, I'm not saying always, but I'm usually the one that's more even keeled. It's like, no, the Lord will provide. Like the Lord will, we have a leader that just backed out of camp. The Lord will provide somebody, like, and he did. Like, so within that, I think I'm less stressed out about ministry than maybe when I first started. Maybe it's because I've realized like there's certain things that like I shouldn't need to worry about, or so for me, I would say a 4 in that. There's always room for improvement, but I'm not generally like losing sleep because I'm stressed out about a certain type of ministry.
Yeah.
How about you?
I thought we were just going to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
I would say, hearing you talk, it's kind of funny because even our dynamic is playing out a little bit in this. I would say a 3. And the reason why is I think from the outside, like I've had, conversations with a lot of people, or like there's a lot of stresses. Like I don't think there's anything unhealthy going on with it. But I do think, just in a moment of honesty, I waste a lot of time talking about them. Like, just, I don't even know if it's like complaining necessarily, but just like, I process out loud, and I'm just realizing how much time I talk. Like, for instance, when we get together to like record, like do stuff, I'm always like, oh, this and this and this. And then you're just like, ask one question, which like kind of summarizes everything. And I'm like, oh, I really wish like you would have like actually like talk, but it's like, no, it's like, boom, like this is, well, did you do this? And I'm like, no, but like, so I think even, I think I still have a calm approach to it, but I think I'm realizing that it's like, dude, you don't need to waste so much time. Like not even worrying, but just it taking up headspace.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not worried about how God's going to do it, but for instance, we had a leader drop out, and it's your own family sometimes that gets you. We had a leader drop out of camp because my dad was sick, and it's like I wasn't worried about it. I wasn't like, how are we gonna make it work? But I was kind of like, well, now that he's gone, like I got to do this, and I got to do this, and we got to do this, and so it's just interesting to me. So I would say a 3, like not crazy, but definitely room for improvement. And I do think I want to give myself a little bit of grace. I do think that's just being young. Like what you said, that was encouraging to me, where you were like, when I was younger in ministry, when you first start in ministry, you have your unknown unknowns, which is like you don't know what you don't know. And then as you grow, you have your known unknowns, which is like now you know what you don't know. And I feel like I've made that transition recently into that kind of stage.
It's good. We were so the way that we do winter camps, we do high school first and then middle school the next weekend, so they're back to back. And they're very similar, same place, like same kind of setup. And what we found is like there's certain processes that we don't need to recreate every time, whatever, like they're pretty similar. And we had and then also inevitably, like other than the staff, we have different volunteers that come. Some volunteers come to both, but for the most part, you have like middle school volunteers and high school volunteers coming separate. And so we had two volunteers that it was like their first time coming to serve in a certain area of camp. And I was riding the bus up with them, and I look over and they're like brainstorming of how to like implement this one thing. Like when they get there, like, you know, it was basically just like assuring that people had pizza when we got to camp. Like it was like the pizza dinner when we got to camp. And they're like, well, what if we set up this? And they're drawing diagrams of like how the table should set up. And I was like, you know, we did this last weekend. And I was like, I really think you're overthinking it. I was like, trust me, everybody will eat. Like they know how to come up and get pizza. And it was like, but how, you know, how to best. And so I think sometimes like inexperience can breed more stress.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like you're stressed out of it because you're not as prepared as you think you might be.
Yeah.
Or you're trying to over prepare because you think the level of complexity is going to match, you know, your concern about it. And so I think there could be danger in both sides of that. But yeah, so I think maybe it's just over the years, like I've realized like there's certain things that just you don't need to start, like things will happen. And
it's kind of like the meme of like the guy with the noose around his neck, and he looks at me, he's like, first time, and he's like, it's kind of like that. It's kind of what I think.
I haven't seen that, but that's that's hilarious.
So number 2, are you enduring hardship well? You know, Greg says the last few years have been full of hardship. He wrote this last year. He says divorce is up, anxiety is up, depression is up. Far too many youth leaders have given up. Have you doubled down on your commitment to Christ in his cause of reaching, encouraging, discipling, and unleashing the next generation? And so what's interesting here is he says hardship is one of those words that means different things in different cultures. Here's an example of the type of hardship that Paul suffered. And he quotes 2 Corinthians 11, 23 through 29, where Paul kind of makes his list of like, here's why you should listen to me. Like I've been shipwrecked. But he actually rewrites it in a modern day for a youth minister. And so I want to read this because maybe your list of hardships would read more like this. So he literally just like replaces the things that Paul says. He goes, I have worked much harder, been called to the senior pastor's office more frequently, been slandered by angry parents more severely, been exposed to sickness again and again. 5 times I have received from the executive pastor a warning about missing receipts. 3 times the church van broke down on the way to an event. Once I was pelted with dodgeballs. I've spent a night and a day with middle schoolers who hadn't taken showers. I've been consistently on the move. I've been in danger from homeschool parents, in danger from entitled preachers' kids, in danger from my fellow staff members, in danger from angry atheists, in danger at camp, in danger on the way to camp, in danger on the way home from camp. I have labored and toiled and have often gone without food other than Mountain Dew and pizza. Besides everything else, I face daily the pressures of my concern for all my teenagers. And he says, youth ministry has hardships, especially now. Are you enduring them well? So Keith, are you enduring hardships well? Of course, a little bit of like a funhouse mirror, like to youth ministry. We know that, and Greg knows, of course, it's like, there's so much that goes into this, but like, you know, 1 to 5, are you enduring hardship well? What would you say?
Okay, so I think it depends on the day, because sometimes, today then I feel pretty good. I feel like now, I feel like coming out of camp, I was really worn down. Like all this past week, I felt like a little burnt out. Yeah. Like, and I realized it because, and I can kind of tell now because I've been doing this for so long that like I can tell when I'm feeling burnout, or like if it's just like, you know, something I'm like, is it an injustice? Like, is it a very minor thing? But then I'm like, hold on, everything is angering me. Like, then I'm like, okay, it's not this incident. And so we have a rule in our house, like with my wife and I, it's like, if the response level is higher than a 5,
not 5 on this, but scale 1 to 10.
It's like 1 is 10. If a response level is higher than a 5, it's not about that issue. It's about something else. And so I found myself like, and I don't know if I think I've told you about this, but like hearing people chew is like a huge pet peeve of mine. But I've noticed that it's an increasingly bothersome to me when I'm not enduring hardship well. Like if I'm just agitated, I'm just like, it's like I notice it more. And then I'm like, okay, that's almost like my litmus test of like how well I'm doing. So I would say right now I'm feeling pretty strong on this, and I'm hopeful for the future. But if you were literally asked me just a few days ago, I'd have been like, the sky's falling, the world is ending. Like this is all, like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't know how, you know, like, so I had a woe is me, like almost like a you know, Elijah or Jonah moment where it's like, why, Lord, you know? And so, so I think it depends on the day, but right now I'm feeling pretty strong. So I'm going to give it a 4 as well.
Okay. Yeah. I think I would go for a 4 as well.
But I felt like I needed to say that it's not all the time.
No, it's definitely not.
So people, it's like, oh, how could you be a 4 all the time? No, I'm not a 4 all the time.
I think I've come more, this actually goes to, what your boss Todd Peters has talked about, being a retired Navy SEAL and a pastor now, and he, it's like, if you're not getting shot at, you're not on the battlefield. And so that's one of the things that I think I can honestly say, with the spiritual growth that we've seen in a lot of our kids. I mean, it's almost like we're just used to dealing with the side of things. I was kind of lamenting to Kathleen on the way home the other night after youth group. I was like, I know it's my job. I was like, but it feels like every youth group is something. Like, and it's a good thing of like, kids are coming to us with their problems. Like they have questions they want to know.
Yeah.
But it's like every youth group right now, a kid's coming and it's like,
Exhausting.
okay, we need to have a follow-up conversation on that, or we need to have a follow-up conversation on this, or this needs to call the parents.
Need to call the parent, yeah.
And I feel like that's been like every single youth group. And not just like light stuff, like I'm not getting along with my parents and like I really need your help, or hey, I have a friend who's dealing with this and like what do I do, or hey, somebody shared that their friend's suicidal and like how do we deal with this. So it's like not just like somebody was upset because they didn't get on the same bus as somebody else, which that happens too. So I would say a 4 in the sense that I don't think I'm just like whatever, it's fine, like move on, but I definitely think it's like this is one of the things where comparison can actually be helpful. It's like, but did they try and kill you? Like reading Paul's like actual list in 2 Corinthians is like, but did they try and kill you? Like, but did you die?
Did you die? Yeah.
So I think the same way, where it's like recently just kind of been through a lot, but now it's almost like the norm. It's like, this is ministry.
Kind of get used to it, yeah.
So I would say a 4.
Yeah, and I think sometimes your expectations, it's like if you expect ministry just to be peaceful all the time and like not have any issues, then yeah, you're going to be frustrated a lot.
And if ministry is peaceful and you don't have any problems, you're not doing ministry.
Yeah.
Like just full stop. Like that's the reality. And so if I guess this is a good warning. I've learned this in year 6. If you're waiting for the time in ministry where there are no problems,
you won't. Yeah.
It will be when you get out of ministry. What's that quote? It's like, ministry would be easy if it wasn't for people. Yeah. It's kind of like that.
Yep.
All right. Number 3, something we talk about often. Are you building a gospel advancing ministry? So in this, Paul charges Timothy to do the work of an evangelist. He says Paul was the ultimate evangelist. Although Timothy was probably wired more as a pastor shepherd than an evangelist, like most youth pastors, Paul challenged him to do the work of an evangelist.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Like that he would say, do the work of an evangelist. Like
that Paul would say that?
Well, I'm just saying, out of all the different work that he could focus on, why did he call it specifically evangelist? And it's like, do the work of a pastor, do the work of a teacher, do the work of a
and that's what Greg says. He says, although Timothy was probably wired more as a pastor shepherd, and I think we can see that in the way that Paul talked to Timothy, that could be why he was exhorting him to do the job of an evangelist. It's like, hey, you're already doing great in these areas, but don't forget, like, do the job of an evangelist. I don't know. I'd have to go back and
it's interesting. I mean, so I'm just curious, like, is that descriptive or prescriptive? Like, was that just to Timothy, or is that like, as pastors, like, are we called to do the work of an evangelist?
Well, so here's what's interesting. Greg continues on. He says, contrary to popular belief, the number one job of the evangelist is not evangelism. He says the numero uno, because of course, Greg, the numero uno job of the evangelist is equipping people to evangelize. And then he quotes Ephesians 4:11-12, where he says that our job as apostles, prophets, evangelists, and teachers is to equip his people for the works of service. And so Paul is challenging Timothy to be a gospel advancing leader, someone who shares the gospel personally and mobilizes others to do the same. Is that what you're doing with your teenagers? So, Keith, are you building a gospel advancing ministry?
Man,
this is they're not easy questions.
I mean, yes. I mean, because that's our focus.
From an outside perspective, who knows your ministry, yes, you guys absolutely are.
I don't know. Like, I always wrestle with, because like friends of mine that are, public school teachers, they're not graded on their teaching. They're graded on the students' testing. Yeah. And so part of me is like, yes, we're doing that. We're talking about evangelism. We're talking about, like, we're training students to do that. We, we're emphasizing that. We're counting gospel conversations. Like, we're encouraging, like, yes, it's all over our ministry. But one of the things I'm just wrestling with lately is like, are they being effective? Like, are they, and so it's something we talked about, in a previous episode where we talked about like, is revival happening? Yeah. And so So I guess like in the sense of like, yes, I'm really building gospel advancement ministry, being faithful to equipping students. But I still know that the Lord can do way more than what we're seeing.
Hmm.
And so that's what I'm kind of wrestling with. I'm like, am I not really emphasizing the right thing? Or like, am I not, being as effective as I think I'm, come across? So yeah, so I would say, I mean, it depends on how I approach that. I want to give myself
You're
a
putting
lower
so many
grade.
caveats
I
on all
know,
these.
I know. This is harder than I thought it would. Um, yes, I feel like I am building a gospel advancing
You
ministry.
can give a range.
So yeah, I would say faithfulness. If we're only gathering faithfulness, which ultimately that's what the Lord is
Absolutely. He
wanting.
calls us to be faithful.
Yeah, but effectiveness, that's what I feel like we can always improve in.
Where are you at faithfulness?
Faithfulness, I would say like a 4.5.
Yeah.
Like we're really, I mean, I'm going to go down to 4. I'm going to say 4.
Yeah.
But effectiveness, I feel like we need to evaluate what the most, and I think even just that some of the stats that we talked about with the Gen Z evangelism thing, I think that's actually helpful for me to look at effectiveness of like what to equip students to focus on. It comes like one-on-one conversations. Yeah, we're talking about gospel, but like to put some legs on it to be like, okay, this is how you can, like, are we just, measuring, like to be more specific about gospel conversations and how we can equip students. So,
You know what we need to do? This is live planning right now.
Yeah.
And this
What do
is
we need
our
to-
listening audiences are getting a look for like how our normal conversations go. It's like we need to each take a Wednesday night off here soon and visit each other's ministry and just kind of see like different perspectives and things like that. I think that'd be helpful to maybe encouraging as well. And so, yeah, if you're listening to this as well, like, do you have other youth leaders that you trust who could maybe visit your youth ministry and say, because you might have your senior leadership visit your youth ministry, but they're not with teenagers all day, every day. And so I think it's helpful. That's another reason why having a cohort, whether, I know we're working on our virtual cohort, but like an in-person cohort where you can, crosstalk and think, I think is encouraging.
I would only come to youth ministry if I can come as a student. I would go undercover as a student. Yeah, I could pass.
Yes, you can. We actually,
I would have to dye the gray out of my beard though,
yeah.
Or not even have a beard. Yeah, students don't have.
There you go.
I mean, some do.
Some of ours.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say for me, I think I'm gonna say this like, and my voice is gonna get high, as in like, like I think. Like I would say a 5, but like I want to be careful of saying.
I would, if I was grading you, I would say a 5.
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like you're firing on a lot of cylinders.
But maybe just giving myself a 5 feels wrong because it's not myself.
I'll give you a 5.
Okay,
how's that?
There you go.
I'm giving myself a 4, even though like I've taught a lot of things to you, but I would say you're 5. Yeah, because like you're able to implement so many different things at the same time that I feel like I often struggle with doing all of them. Yeah. And even what's in my brain, like as far as like what I, like what I know, it doesn't always translate to what my students know as well. So implementation is what you're like killing at. Yeah. And I struggle with that. It's always in my brain, but like as far as implementing it to the, to the level, again, or I make the mistake, and I have to fight against this too, since I've been in the same kind of vein of ministry for so long. I'm like, oh yeah, we've already talked about this. It's like, but that was 7 years ago when we didn't have the same students, or and so within that, like that's always, I'm like, wait a second, my students do, so I'm curious. Even if you came to visit, if you asked some of my students, like they'd be like, what are you talking about? Yeah, like gospel advancement ministry values, like even though I talk about it all the time in my mind.
Dude, we're doing this. I'm going undercover, and I'm gonna be like, hey, what's the gospel? I'm just gonna like ask your kids that and see what happens.
Just tell me what day so I can prepare ahead of time and like and just train them even more. Yeah.
All right, number 4, the one that I'm dreading the most out of this list, and people are like, that's the first 3, and this is the one you're dreading. Are you doing your job in every area as a youth leader? And that's where Paul says, discharging all the duties of your ministry. Greg says, most youth leaders don't get fired because of immorality, but because of irresponsibility. Ooh. Most people don't like keeping track of receipts, going to endless staff meetings, collecting camp waivers, filling out insurance forms, doing their time cards. God bless you if you have a time card. Some of you do.
I have to approve time cards every
Oh, man. Yeah. Or sending out updates to parents and teenagers. But for most youth leaders, these are all part of, quote, discharging all the duties of your ministry. Take care of the details so you can take on your mission. Do the grunt work so you can keep doing the good work. Make it to your meetings on time so you can keep making disciples over time. Man, dude, Greg is like...
This is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has been like really
It's
cathartic.
convicting
Like,
too. Yeah.
but it is good to just kind of go through this. All right, I'll go first on this one because I just came off camp and I just realized this.
Mhm.
Like, I'm gonna give myself an excuse, which is always bad, before I give myself an answer. I would say, I would say, I would say a 4, but like it would be closer to a 3 than a 5. And the reason is, as our ministry has continued to grow spiritually,
Mhm.
you can ask volunteers to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Asking volunteers to
Do
like
the groundwork.
yeah,
It's
like
hard.
that's not really. I mean, that's kind of like, okay, we're all called to make disciples. As our leadership says, it's like, look, our job is to allow people to do their best ministry. So
Mhm.
if I have a couple hours of a faithful volunteer's time, I want them to be working with students and working with their small group, not making sure that like so and so's parent has filled out the camp waiver, things like that. So
Mhm.
I mean, I think it's getting done, but I have noticed a couple places in which I'm like, for instance, I get all the response cards from camp, and normally I would pour through those, and right now I'm so busy where it's like I check for spiritual decisions, and like
Yeah.
the rest of the
Go
feedback
through.
right now I'm not really. I wish I had more time or doing things like that. So I would
Yeah.
I would say a 4, but I would say, and be ready, like, because if you're listening to this podcast in growth, and we're talking about simple systems that work, like there's so much that goes into just keeping the healthy.
Mm.
As Dan Spader likes to say, it's like Jesus came for the sick, but yet we are to keep the healthy so that they continue to take care of the sick.
Yeah.
And so I would say a 4, but I would say that it has been very stressful as it's continued to
Mm.
grow to do this. Like
Yep.
for instance, I writing thank you notes to all of my leaders. Like I know I need to do it, but then I was like, man, I was like, that's like a day. Like
Mm.
not because of like I'm gonna write 3 pages, but it's just like when I look at all the volunteers who came to both camps, plus we just had our auction, and I want to write a thank you note to everybody who gave. It's like that's like a day of just
Yeah.
writing
Just
thank you
running. Yeah.
notes and things like that. And so
Yeah.
my
That,
mind is like, well, that's not making disciples, but it's like, no, but it's keeping the healthy.
yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna say a 3 in this area,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe not for the reasons that you may think.
You don't know the
So
reasons, I think.
well, I mean, the stuff that he lists.
Yes, I got you.
Tracking receipts,
Yeah.
endless staff meetings, camp waivers,
Yeah.
insurance forms. I feel like I'm like a 5 in all of those
Yeah.
things because I've come a long way.
Yeah.
That wasn't always me. I'm not like
Don't spend
incredibly
any money and you won't have any receipts.
Yeah.
Life hack.
Yeah. But with that though, I have the way that I see this now is that those things are necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So like we can't go to camp without collecting all the waivers. Like
Yeah.
we can't, so there's like a built-in layer of accountability.
Yeah.
My leaders can't prepare for the lesson if I don't get them the lesson study guide,
Yeah.
ahead of time.
Yeah.
So like those are just built-in things in my weekly routine that I need to get
Yeah.
out. Like, so just the administrative things, whatever that I need to. So what I feel like I'm not discharging all the duties of my ministry is more on the vine side. So that's like more trellis stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like, building the structure of a ministry, like the, and administrative work so that the vine can grow. But I feel like I can improve so much more with like touch points with students as far as like, encouraging them in the word, like by, sending them a group chat message or to, reach out to parents that, just checking in with them to see how and so I feel like I can always improve on that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And which is more, I mean, crucial, I think,
Yeah.
to like so like caring for people spiritually is where I feel like I'm lacking in the season right now, just because there is so much administrative stuff in where I'm at right now. But I think now that we're over the hump of like winter camps and getting all that stuff prepared, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into that for, pull off between all of our locations. We had tons of due dates and stuff for everything. So all that administrative stuff, like I felt like it was just built in to where I had accountability with it. And like I had, it wasn't a struggle for me to do all that stuff. But now I'm like, okay, I really need to focus on shepherding the students that we have, caring for the ones that are like on the fringe, like they, so even just keeping track of who hasn't come in a few weeks, like to reach out to them so we're just, making strides in that area now where I feel like those are more the important duties of ministry that I feel like I've not been the greatest at lately.
Yeah. Man, you know what would be, how you get a good read on this? Could you imagine? And I don't know if I'm going to do this, but I think it'd be good to do. Send this to your leaders and ask your leaders how to anonymously give their feedback on how you're doing this. Because if anybody's going to know, it's going to be your leader. You could
Oh,
actually,
you mean like to evaluate you?
yes.
Oh,
Yeah, to send it to your leaders and just say, hey, I'm looking to grow. Because could you imagine asking your leaders, hey, am I calmly facing the stresses of the ministry? Hey, am I enduring hardship well? Am I constantly building a gospel advancing ministry? Am I doing well? Am I doing my
they
job
know.
in
Yeah,
every
they
area
know.
as a youth leader?
Well, I remember doing this in seminary. It was like the 360-degree leadership. Have you heard of that?
No.
So it's like
But if you do 360, you end up in the same place you started.
yeah, no, I'm saying it's you ask people that have different so your spouse fills it out, like your
I
leaders.
was going to mention
your
spouse, but
yeah.
oh, man.
If you want to just really know what score it is, send this to your wife and ask
Yeah.
her to fill it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
My
within
wife's
that,
too kind. She's too kind.
yeah. And so with that though, it was the 360. I remember it was like really effective because you had different people in different areas of your life. Because sometimes we like silo out different areas, where it's like you're really doing awesome in ministry context, but it's like your family life is really suffering. So it's like when your spouse fills it out and gives you an honest opinion on like, and so anyways, and vice versa. Like you might be killing it in family. It's like, but it's like we haven't seen him in a staff meeting for weeks, or like or like he hasn't filled out a stinking receipt, reimbursement for so whatever that is. I think it's good to have multiple. Yeah, so that would be a good idea, a very convicting idea to send it out to.
Even more
leaders.
convicting. Are you calmly facing the stresses of your family? Are you enduring hardship well as a dad? Are you building a gospel advancing family? Are you doing your job as a dad in every area? That's man, good job, Greg.
Yeah, this is a well-written article.
It's just like so cathartic to sit down and do this. And so, I mean, yeah, we've talked about the importance of a mentor. Like if you have a mentor, if you're listening to this, you have a mentor, like sit down and go through this with them. And it's also like, okay, so you and I mostly answered like threes, like maybe a three, mostly
I did
fours,
fours a lot,
a couple of five, and then we had a five.
You had a 5, I didn't.
Somebody's taking this, they're like, man, I'm like a 1 or 2, or like in some of these areas. Maybe let's finish our time today. What's your best piece of encouragement to that person who's like, I'm not doing well in some of these areas?
I would say, get around other people, like, cause there's some dark, discouraging times that, I could, different seasons, I would have answered 1s on a lot of these.
Yeah.
So in other words, like, but maybe that's an encouragement to people that are listening. It's like, okay, just because I'm, strong in certain areas now doesn't mean that I always have been.
Yeah.
And so I would just have like the best is yet to come mentality.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, cause you look at, was it Ezekiel 37 where God takes Ezekiel to the valley of the dry bones. And it's like, like dry bones represent like, these are people that have been dead for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And said that the reasons why that these are here is because Israel lost hope. Mm-hmm. And there's a direct connection, I believe, with like deadness and like dryness and and losing hope and things getting better. And so with that, I would say hold on to hope, like that it will, it can get better. It doesn't mean that it will get better in the time frame that you want it to. But surround yourself with other people. Join our youth ministry mastermind, because like literally we built it just to support people that are struggling and like that are and even if you are healthy, you're now a contributor to other people that are maybe further back than we are. So I would say don't give up hope. Surround yourself with other people that can help you. Join our mastermind so that you can be encouraged with that. And then just pray. Get before the Lord, like just really seek his face to ask him to revive things. And we talked about revival in one of the past episodes. And realistically, and I remember this was a revivalist that was said this. It's like, how can we have revival like in our town? It's like, okay, I want you to go home. I want you to draw a circle on the floor. I want you to stand in that circle and pray for revival within that circle. And it's just like, so maybe the Lord is using this to get your attention, to really seek him and to really revive your own heart before you expect that in other people.
Wow. I didn't like this episode. that last piece right there, I was like, oh, that hurt.
Yeah, very convicting.
Well, hopefully you liked this episode. Hopefully Keith and I kind of going.
It's not about we're not always just trying to be likable. We want to make sure that we're improving and being effective.
So we appreciate you guys. Free plug for like Greg's stuff. This is from his blog post. Greg does amazing work. If you enjoy our podcast, check out Greg's podcast, Radical Like Jesus. It is super encouraging. He has awesome guests on,
including Todd, my boss.
Yeah, absolutely.
Todd Peters was on there.
Yep, I learned stuff about Todd God on that podcast that like I have not known in all the years of working with you through this that he hasn't shared. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. As Keith mentioned, we have that Beyond the Youth Room, the Youth Ministry Mastermind for youth leaders like yourselves. So please go ahead, follow the link below and click on that. Hopefully, if you listen to us take this, maybe you have some other youth pastors, youth leaders, send this podcast to them and just say, hey, check this out, and maybe even do this together. Do what Keith and I just did and kind of live go through this together, ask them for lunch or coffee or whatever. But we just want to encourage, and because man, the next generation is so worth it. So even if you are feeling like, hey, I'm not doing so hot in some of these areas, then just remember that eternity in heaven with God is for your students is worth it every single time. So we appreciate you guys checking out this podcast, and we will see you on the next episode.